As I warned in my video last week, our Prime Minister was once again humiliated at the European Council in Brussels. She was just given 15 minutes to pitch her deal on where Britain should be after we've left the European Union, whilst the other 27 heads of state and government listened in bored silence. Her arguments were again ignored. And in a surprise reply to this rebuff, Mrs May suddenly announced she wanted to extend the transition period after Brexit. One wonders who was more surprised, the Cabinet or the Commons, or indeed us. This had never been number 10 policy before. So where did this new surrender come from? Well, Mrs May seems to want us to believe it was Whitehall policy. Given how Ollie Robbins has been unapologetic in his love for all things pro-EU and anti-democratic, that may well be the case. After all, it would fit the pattern, wouldn't it? Just last week, Sir Richard Dearlove, the former chief of MI6, said Ollie Robbins and other civil servants in number 10, and I quote, had serious questions of improper conduct to answer in connection with some parts of Brexit negotiation. But where has this new policy of asking for an extension period really come from? I have seen evidence that it's coming from a policy institute whose president is Herman Van Rompuy. Do you remember him? This is the one that Nigel Farage said was a damp rag. But in reality, he was a powerful man. He was the former president of the European Council. He's one of the many presidents of the European Union. He is not a man to be ignored lightly, and nor is he a man who's not to have power in his hand with discussions with the European Union. Because in July of this year, Mr. Van Rompuy's think tank released a paper urging for an extended transition period. And in September, they released a second paper urging the same thing. So what is the aim of it? The aim of it is to turn the temporary Northern Irish backstop into a permanent customs union. A customs union that Mrs May herself confirmed yesterday would be legally binding. So you can see it. The shape of Theresa May's deal is now more clear than ever. It is Brino, Brexit in name only. Her deal will continue to make Britain subservient to EU law for years to come. It will prevent us as a sovereign state from fulfilling our potential as a great trading company that values freedom, that values democracy. All the things that men like Alistair Campbell and his MPs vote would consign to the dustbin of history. Yes, our own anti-democrats were out in force this weekend. Tuscan villas were vacated en masse as the Ramona geriatrics coordinated their travels down to London to fight for their future. Yeah, they were joined by celebrities whose respect for the British public has expired, along with a raft of Islington intellectuals fighting desperately for their beloved United States of Europe. Yes, do you hear the numbers? All 700,000 of them. Well, that's what the message the mainstream media are trying to feed the British public, desperate to portray this as a watershed moment in the fight to stay in the European Union. However, once again, they're engaged in fake news. Given a general estimate of 3 people per square metre, there cannot possibly have been more than 150,000 people at Saturday's demonstration. And yet the Ramonas have been clinging on to the gospel of 700,000, seamlessly oblivious to the fact that 700,000, I don't know, is just a little bit smaller than the 17.4 million voters who voted to leave. No doubt this is a concerted effort from both the establishment and the European Union, raising their game in the final months of negotiations to thwart the will of the British public. And whilst they're doing that, I will be here in Strasbourg as you look around me, where whole swathes of legislation will enter the UK statute book. This week, we're going to see new legislation on plastics. I've seen legislation that will impact small businesses across Europe that weren't in the manifestos of the Labour Party or the Conservative Party in the last election. Legislation that will mean we will never receive a meaningful vote in the Houses of Parliament and will affect the lives of millions of people. In 2016, we voted to leave. Yet under Theresa May's proposals, we will still be under the diktats of the European Union long after 2019. And by the time this deal will have been done, just think about it. It would have been longer to do the Second World War than it would to leave the European Union. A dreadful thought for all of us to think about. Leave means withdrawing from all the European treaties, not being kept in it by stealth. Thank you.